Okay, I'm going to share screen.
And there's Martha too, good, so we really. I think this is on me. To get rid of that there. There we go.
Okay.
All right.
We'll go ahead and we'll call the meeting to order. There's no public here to be heard tonight. So we'll move on to approving the minutes from March 14th. Is there a motion to? Okay. Second, okay. And all in favor, raise your hand.
Aye.
Approve.
Martha says yeah. All right, I think you got unanimous vote to approve.
Okay, great. So our first item of business is the 2023 Exclusionary Housing Program Metrics Report. And Molly, I believe that's.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh, you have it. Perfect. Just give some directions to scroll down.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We are here to present on our Inclusionary Housing Annual Report for 2023. This is something that we will be presenting to Council on May 7th. So go ahead and scroll down. So we track our affordable homes provided over time each year. And so what we are tracking here is permanently deed restricted homes that we have added to our stock over time. So we are up to 2,702 units this year. As you can see, the years they really can go up and down quite a bit. That big jump you see in about 2018, I think, is when we started modifying the percentage of AMI units that we counted. So that's why that was so large that time. But over time since, it's been an incremental gradual increase. We had a huge increase between 2021 and 2022. And that's because a lot of projects came to fruition that year that were driven by ARPA investment from the city, or just a lot more funding starting to come in right that time that were related to COVID recovery. Then we entered, so we had a big delivery that year. And then in 2023, we entered another planning year where we have a lot of projects in progress, in pre-development, or just getting ready to do building permits. And so you'll most likely see another jump in delivery in 2024 and 2025, but it was a little bit more steady this last year. Go ahead and go down. Oh, and I should mention, I apologize. There was a note up there. This year we're at 6.18% of our total housing stock, which our goal is 12%, along with every other community in the regional housing partnership. Thank you. Sorry about that. I missed a point there. Last year, we were at a little bit higher of a percentage, and even though we gained 8 units in total, our percentage went down because our number of market units outweighed the number of units that we brought in. So as a percentage of total housing stock, we still hovered above 6%, but didn't actually increase our total housing stock. So, okay, thank you. Now you can go back down. Here's our projections for affordable unit generation over the next 3 years or so. We project 164 units in 2024. That's that kind of wave that comes in once a lot of projects were in pre-development in 2023. And then we project 50 in 25 and 207 in 2026 based on what we see in the pipeline. As you can see, our federal funds leverage in 2023, this is really all of that planning, all of the financial work that goes in before you actually deliver the units. We had a huge jump in 2023. This is again fueled by ARPA. It's fueled by LIHTC awards that come in. So that means low income housing tax credits, because that brings in a lot of private equity funds. And so we had a couple projects that really hit that here for this year. You can see over time that has increased. We do expect that last year, we would have expected that to level off as some of that COVID related federal funds trailed off. However, with the Prop 123 that is coming on board, and now the county funded Prop 1B funds, those will be starting sales tax generation in 2025, and then we'll see those investments hopefully soon after. We do expect the leveraged amount to come in and continue growing over time. So what that really means is for every dollar invested by city funds, this is the, well, I'm going to pull up the dollar count here in a moment, but there's a ratio there that is pretty impressive. It's for every dollar that the city invests in our local funds, a lot more money comes in on federal, as you can see between that $3 million and the 102 million leveraged. There's a ratio that I'll try and pull up here when I have a moment. Okay, go ahead and come down. So a lot of that was fueled by our inclusionary housing program. Some of it is fueled by our affordable housing funds. But then when we look back at just truly in the inclusionary housing, that fee in lieu that some developers pay in lieu of building units, we did see finally the true bump in funds come in 2023. When the inclusionary housing program went into effect in the end of 2018, we knew that it would take some time for the projects that were farther along in the process to grandfather themselves out. And then all of those new developments that started work around 2018 or after now are actually coming to fruition. And so the money is starting to flow. So we did bring in 2.7 million in 2023. That exceeded our conservative estimate. Our high estimate was 3.2 million, and we were pretty dang close to that. So we do expect fee in lieu to rise for a time. Eventually, as Longmont becomes built out on the fringe, all of that raw land that is buildable is built out, and we start moving into more of an infill model, you would see that fee in lieu kind of trail off or plateau at least, because we're dealing with kind of smaller projects. Go ahead and go down. So we did a lot of work on our inclusionary housing program last year, fueled by the root policy research work that was funded by a state grant that we completed. We brought in Root, and all of you have been briefed on this, but we brought in Root to look at our inclusionary housing program 5 years in, tell us what was working, what might need some tweaks, and then we presented those to council as recommendations. And in November, we did get that inclusionary housing ordinance updated to increase the fee in lieu and modify the methodology to make a little bit more sense for current data and Longmont's situation. And then have done a couple of other code cleanups. We changed our, we're bringing back inclusionary housing, affordable housing incentives for developers. We're bringing those to council in, well, we first presented them in February. We're bringing back the ordinance to get an initial take on it in May. And so we've been doing a lot of work on our code when it comes to inclusionary housing and our incentives program, all fueled by that root policy research study that we completed. We also modified our middle tier option that's in the inclusionary housing code because we now have an attainable housing fee waiver. It really made sense to kind of right size that to make sure it worked well with the fee waiver option. What we want to do in 2024, we're still working on those incentives and working with planning on some things that they're doing around changing parking requirements. And then they're figuring out right now if they look at ADUs or short-term rentals closer. And so that might be coming in 2024 that we would also participate in that may or may not be directly related to IH, but certainly affordable housing. Okay, so that's the brief snapshot. It looks a lot different than years past for those that have seen prior year reports. That's because all of our data now is being tracked in real time online. And so that was something that Root helped us set up, is a data dashboard. So it's got some housing market analysis information there right now. And then as we kind of deep dive and get our annual report data updated more on a monthly or quarterly basis, That will also be available online, so anyone can look it up in real time. And so when we go to council and present this in May, we'll find out if they want to continue it in the fashion that we have been, or rely more on that real-time data dashboard. So I will, while we go over any questions or comments, I will look up our link to the data dashboard and share it in the chat.
Is there any way that we can email it to the board, Molly? That'd be great.
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Can we just email it to the board? Can you,
Sure.
you know, Brenda, if Brenda can
Yeah.
email it to the board, that would be great, so the
Yeah.
board can have real-time access to that dashboard. I think that's great.
I have an interesting question, and I don't know if it's ever been considered, but has there been discussion about mandating affordable housing with developers versus fee in lieu, so completely dropping fee in lieu?
Yeah, when the council first considered IH for about a year and a half of development between about 2016 and when it was adopted in 2018, that was certainly considered, and some communities do mandate it. Well, I should say all of them have had a fee in lieu option, because before 2021, there were some limitations in state statute that you had to have an option of some sort. So most of them have it. The real methodology is, how high do you make your fee in lieu to ensure that it's still desirable to build on site, but also have that option? Because what we have that's unique to many Colorado communities is a locally funded affordable housing fund. And so if we bring that fee in lieu in, we have a mechanism to join it with the local funds and then put it out for competitive award and have more money leveraged, meaning we put in some, but we enable big time money to come in from federal sources or private equity or tax credit equity. And then they can come in and we can actually deliver more units than if the developers provided them on site. However, it is still incredibly valuable to have them on site as well, to make sure that we don't, we have the inclusionary housing units spread across the community and mixed in with market rate. So for Longmont's council, it was all about that balance. How do we encourage the units on site, but also bring enough fee in lieu to be able to leverage it and bring in more units and kind of play both sides? That was the intent of council in 2018. And then based on the updates that were approved this last year, that is still council's general direction.
Okay, thanks. Crystal.
Yeah, I don't know if I really I'm trying to put together my question here, but kind of to piggyback off of the last question. I think it's really interesting that by being able to get these fee in lieu money, that we're able to multiply or I guess get a larger amount of money to go toward housing, but it doesn't necessarily solve the problem at hand, which is we need units right now. So with that being said, have you guys ever put the two side by side, the benefit of, what would it look like if all of our developers did provide the units that they promised going into the deal versus doing the fee in lieu? Is the money more valuable getting the fee in lieu and multiplying it through the government, or is it more valuable having these units available and ready today for families who don't have affordable housing or at risk of losing their housing? Have you guys ever looked into that?
So I would say that there's not necessarily a time gap. We collected 2.7 million in 2023, and it's out for competitive award right now. So not the full 2.7, some of that is mixing with other sources and helping fund our administrative needs, but we basically can turn it around and put it back out for competitive award right away. I would say that the cost to build an affordable unit, like a regular sized 1 to 2 bedroom apartment, is running about $400,000. So some developers simply cannot take that hit on their developments if they're smaller developers, which we do want in our community, mixed in with other size developers as well. So for some, it can be a project killer. And so having those options, and our council actually put in place more than just the on-site versus the fee in lieu option. There's a whole menu of options. You can do a combo. It's really built to be flexible for the developers, all of which gives us something that we need in our community. And I do think that it was smart of them to do that, even though it makes it harder to administer, because then we get a mix. We get some provided on site with construction. We get to leverage some into low-income housing tax credit deals, which are bring a ton of equity into our area and allow us to build more units. So I do think that the balance is actually pretty critical. And council has selected options that recognize that. Did I miss any part of that question, Crystal? I know you talked about the timing gap and weighing the balance, the difference between the two. Was there any piece that I missed?
No, I think you kind of hit it on the head there. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't have a question, Kim.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I got a few questions. One, I'm just kind of adding to this current conversation. So if you got $2.7 million and a 2-bedroom unit cost $400,000, that means you made 7 additional units. Based on this fee in lieu is what the numbers I looked at.
If you count that just 1-to-1 versus no leveraging, yeah.
1-to-1. You mentioned ADU. I'm kind of want some clarification on that. I mean, let's say, for example, I could put an ADU in my backyard. So are there additional rules that you're coming up with, or?
What I do know is that planning is looking at our approval process for ADU, and they'll be presenting, they're formulating something to present to council that kind of, that's mostly in the planning realm. We're just paying attention because that is part of affordable housing stock naturally occurring or not. But they're also watching, the legislature is coming out with a bill around ADUs, and they also want to see how that plays out. So it does seem like the conversation around ADUs is happening, and we're trying to stay involved. We also have an ADU stock plan program that we haven't gotten off the ground yet. That is a goal for 2024, where in exchange for restricting, if you're renting it, restricting it to a low-income person, and then we would pay for, you can have the stock plans essentially for free. And then that is also already has an expedited review process because it's already been reviewed by planning. That is something that we're hoping to put out there later this year, and something that Root, as part of their study, gave us some sample programs from around the country that we could try and pull pieces from or model after. So there might be some ADU work coming.
Because I saw something in Oregon, legislation was going to approve an SRO, a single room occupancy for low income. I mean, really low income, or maybe just a single person who maybe just out of high school and they want their own place to live instead of maybe living with their parents. But it would be, low cost if it was a single room and you had a bathroom and a kitchen and a bedroom. That's it. But I don't think that's been approved in Longmont yet, but that was something Oregon was looking at. I also wanted to mention on your inclusionary housing and looking at the big picture, because I saw the council mention that in 2030, there's going to be, it's going to be environmentally friendly here. We're going to use everything that's, gas is going to be removed. We're just going to have all electricity. We're going to reduce the carbon dioxide output to 0. So with that in mind, I was looking at this housing and saying, okay, well, some of the parking, each unit's going to have half a unit of parking. And if we want 0% carbon dioxide, then there has to be some type of EV setup. So I don't see that, with this half, parking space per unit, we're not going to reach our 100% goal in 2030. So I think that, based on that, I see like each unit should have an EV charging unit if we're going to meet the 2030 goal.
So the 2030 goal is about unit generation, and yes, parking in terms of using land for parking versus units does play into that certainly. There is a new law in effect as of March that any project, market or affordable, whichever, going through entitlements from this point on has really much higher EV requirements than there was ever before. So that is going to be coming down the pike. Projects that are have not yet submitted for building permit as of March 15th, it applies. So there's a big changes coming on EVs now. And then of course, like I mentioned, planning is working on some changes to parking requirements, including affordable and market rate all across the board, that to try and reduce parking amounts, which would, if that goes through, the more land available for units, then it would help us in our unit generation.
So, okay,
Does that answer your question?
I know Graham has his hand up, but I want to address a little bit of what Michael's talking about, if that's okay. So I think another thing to think about is that, because I was here this week when Joe Nagoose was here talking about Longmont's micro transit program that we're going to be developing. I think that's also going to help with the parking situation and making the city more walkable, more pedestrian friendly, more bikeable. So we're yes to the EV thing, and I think Longmont, I think Rep. Nagoose, really recognized the innovation that Longmont's trying to do to create our own micro transit type of work. So think Uber, think something like, door to door type of
Subsidized.
yeah, so we want to say yes to the EV thing, and Longmont's looking at really that enhancing our public transportation options. Go ahead, Graham, sorry. Oh, unless you have anything else, Michael, sorry.
No, thank you. Be back.
Okay, thanks, Molly, for the report. The goal of 12% affordable housing is what year is that by? What's the timeline on that goal?
2035.
Okay, even with the jump you're projecting in 26, I mean, I don't know if you have a different view, but it looks like it's not attainable without some dramatic new thing happening. Is that how city reads it too?
Yep. So it was aspirational when the goal was set in 2017 by the Regional Housing Partnership, knowing that significant extra funding sources needed to be available to even get close. But that is the aspirational goal because that is what the need is. What that means, I think last year, and I should prep this when we present to council as well. Last year, we said that meant you needed to generate over 200 units a year. And last year we did surpass that, but that needs to be held consistently and not have our waves that we have. And so we need significant funding investment to be able to do that. Prop 123, if we can successfully bring the money back into Longmont, and Prop 1B, same situation, assuming we can get the money back in for projects, those would help. But I don't even think those, I think our general thought is we needed more money than that to reach this goal. So there still needs, the need is so vast that even with these funding sources out there, something we said last year is that before Prop 123 and Prop 1B were in the mix, we said that even with the ARPA investment, the city put in $8.8 million to affordable housing, and all that did was catch up from the dip that COVID caused. It didn't get us ahead. It just caught us up from, 2 to 3 years worth of stagnancy. So the need is very much higher than the resources available, but we're still doing everything we can within our power to get there.
So is it really just money? I mean, is there land and policy and people ready to build and all that? And it's
all
really just money.
Policy is really important, I'd say, across the county. Longmont's policies are generally very friendly to affordable housing, but land use is a restriction. There's only so much available. A lot of the land within Longmont's planning area just outside city boundaries has already been bought up by open space. And then generally, it's also a desire for developers, like attracting developers, which goes into also the fee and lieu versus the unit generation. We want to attract developers here and get them through our process And we need developers to want to build here to get there as well. So there's a lot more that goes into it than just money, but it certainly cannot be done without money.
Yeah, so I guess my line of question, I just want to make a suggestion, I guess maybe to city staff, is that, you know, maybe presenting enough general data to council to say this is what it would take to get close. Like this is what we would need as sort of like a gut reality check for council or for the folks who might have some influence on the topic, is to say, you know, we'll have to take X more of the general budget to fund, or, you know, whatever it is, or change policy, et cetera. I think that might be just an interesting thing to show, if only a slide, you know.
That's good feedback. Thank you.
Okay.
We'll run some
Yeah.
numbers.
Just to follow Graham's line of questioning, Molly, I think I heard you say if we can bring County 1B and Prop 123 funds back, that still won't be enough. And so I kind of had a compound question. Help me understand what that means if we can bring them back, and what would it take to bring them back? And then even if that's not enough, what other sources of funding are available to achieve that 12% goal?
Sure. So Prop 123 has been all competitive process so far. And it has not made it back to Boulder County, any Boulder County communities yet, is what I'm hearing from the Regional Housing Partnership chats as of this morning. It is all competitive. And so it's not necessarily formulaic where everybody always gets something. And there's a big debate right now about how Prop 123 requires you to set these targets that you have to meet to continue to qualify for funding. However, if there's not enough funding to go around to everyone, how will we meet those? That is an ongoing and budding question those conversations are gonna be had here coming up. Prop 1B, the Regional Housing Partnership is working with Boulder County right now to help determine what that funding allocation process should look like. Is it competitive? Is it formulaic? Is it a combination of the two? But if it is competitive, then there will be work involved to bring it back to Longmont. I will also say, in terms of other resources out there, CHAFA, the Colorado Housing Finance Authority, they award out the low-income housing tax credits each year. And when we had 2 projects in the mix in fall 2023, they were 4 times oversubscribed. So, and that is the most commonly used and generally at least always available source of funds out there. And I only see, with the rise of affordable housing efforts, that oversubscription continuing to worsen unless more money is put into that program, which there is actually a bill in the legislature now to consider that. And so that's very telling to me. Plus, the projects that did get funded, the 1 and 4, had to have quite unique, very special project elements with them to get through, because the competition is so stiff. We had 1 project out of 2 get awarded, and it was on its first time, which is actually can be rare, but it included an early childhood education center in partnership with the city and children, youth, and families to bring services related to families there. And that was enough to tip the scales. But if it's not something quite unique or has some service element associated, I don't really see a project competing very easily. So looking at other funding sources, I mean, only if they're out there. HUD isn't necessarily increasing funding to, for example, housing authorities for vouchers right now. They're not doing that for Longmont. That is a constant challenge and has been for decades, but it continues. So those are just a sampling of the major funding sources and what that picture really looks like.
Crystal, I think your hand was up next.
Yeah, sorry, I have one more question. My apologies. I'm just kind of like, and forgive me, because I think I'm a resource navigator, so I see and meet with these people daily. who are
Mhm.
struggling. And so I'm like a housing now kind of mindset, right? But I know that there's so much more that goes into it. And I know you guys are doing everything in you can that in your department that you can to make sure that we're pumping out this affordable housing to meet this goal. I heard you say that it was like 400 and something to meet the goal. Is that correct, of affordable units per year?
It's 200. It was over 200 last year. I'll rerun those numbers ahead of the council communication.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so my question was, with the amount of development in a perfect world, if they all provided the amount of units, affordable units that they promised to provide going into it per year, how many units would that even produce?
I would have to look up that number and see what our Kayleen is not on tonight. She was ill, but she is our keeper of planning's data on how many market rate units went through in the year. So let me make a note to get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Martha, your hand raised?
Yes, I didn't see it covered or mentioned in the what was emailed with the agenda, but I was curious if there were firm lines about what was affordable or not. And I ask it like that because there's a predominant amount of people on my workload who are unhoused, and they do best with like subsidies and subsidized housing. Is that
Right.
going to be a percentage or fraction, or is it going to be, you know, this vague affordable? Because like technically my apartments are affordable, but I pay $2,100 a month, and I have to make 3 times that. Well, I guess now it's 2 times that since in June, but I just wondered if that could maybe be an opportunity, because it's not like they won't be getting the money. It just will be coming from a different avenue, but it's still, you know, a bit of an incentive to draw people to do
Right.
that.
So there is, so just to, and apologies for anybody if this is going back to the basics, but just in case this is not totally evident right at the outset. We measure affordability of units based on area median income. And so 100% of area median income means half of Longmont makes more than that, half makes less. Longmont considers for our inclusionary housing program a unit to be permanently affordable if it's affordable to a household that makes 50% of the area median income or less for rentals and 80% or less for sale units. So that's how we define it in the IH program. There's a little bit of, it could be a little bit more of a range depending on what funding source you're using, because some statewide ones use different numbers, but it's all generally 50 or 60% of AMI and below for rentals. On the subsidy side, that is super critical because that's how we access market rate housing by helping people pay rent. Our housing choice voucher program, which that is what that program is called. HUD has not increased our funding in some time, even though our need is there, which is an argument we are breaking open with them. In our last lottery, so we open up a lottery to get on a wait list of between 100 and 250 people. And then once you're on the wait list, you wait your turn in line. In the beginning of 2022, we opened the lottery and we had something like 1,200 families apply for the lottery to be on the wait list of 150 families. So the need is so large, and that is something we certainly need. The inclusionary housing program provides the units, and then you have to income qualify to occupy them. The housing choice voucher program is totally separate. It's through the Longmont Housing Authority. It's heavily influenced by HUD rules, and they're 2 separate things, but they're both really critical to providing units for people that earn certain incomes below those thresholds. And yes, the income limits are set by HUD. and it feels bonkers. Like the level that's considered affordable, it's based on 30% of a household's income. Anything over that is considered housing cost burdened. But even 30%, given some households have different levels of debt or different commitments if it's related to child support, or it could be a million things, that still feels like too much. But that is the HUD limit based on census data, and the generally acceptable level of 30% of your income should be spent on housing. Ideally less, much less, but that's the maximum. Does that make sense? Or did I answer your question?
Yeah, Molly, I'm just curious about your reaction to this comment. Earlier when you were talking about kind of your vision for housing, or maybe just the way it's going to unfold, is it's continuing to spread into those areas on the, I think you said that maybe the edges of town, and that down the road, infill development may be more likely. And I was wondering what you thought about this new transit center that's getting some momentum, and transit-oriented development that may occur around that new transit center. Do you think that could be a major boon for affordable housing?
Oh, yes. We know the transit center itself, and there will be housing on top of the transit center. That's what's proposed, apartments. It would be primarily market rate, but meeting their IH units on site. That is as of the last proposal that I saw, because it's a private developer. But then we do have, the city does own land in the transit station area down there closer to the river that is slated for affordable housing. It's 3.5 acres. We plan to make that all affordable. And then we are working with a developer to see if we can do a middle income rental. So it's still income restricted, but in that middle income range, somewhere in that area as well. And then there are transit-oriented development funding opportunities coming out of the FHWA, the Federal Highways Administration, through the Colorado Department of Transportation. We're looking at that as well to see if that could be a source that we could tap into. Transit-oriented development is a hot topic right now, especially in Longmont. And so we're hoping to ride that wave for sure.
Comment on your statements. And I think the definition of inclusionary or affordable probably changes, I don't know, yearly, what the AMI is, because I'm just seeing right
The income
now.
levels do, yes. The
Yeah.
percentages always stay about the same, but the income levels change.
Because I'm seeing right now the inflation still high, so interest rates are going up again. So if a developer came in today and had to get a mortgage, it's no longer 7%, now it's 8% to 9%. So how many units can he build? And then how much rent is he going to be able to charge to pay his, the mortgages? And it's not going to be 1,800. Yeah, it might need to be 2,000 or 2,100 just for him to break even. So I think that changes yearly based on inflation. So I'm kind of concerned too, if, as a builder comes in and, I think Longmont, there's been boom and bust. There's a lot of foreclosed properties back in 2013 when I was living here, but don't know if, I see that as a red flag where, if the costs keep going up and, people can't afford to live here anymore. There are other cities that are less expensive. They don't have as high mill levies and probably property taxes. Maybe the land's less expensive. They probably have more land too. But I just see that as a red flag where, okay, you build 1,000 units, but are you going to get 1,000 tenants to live here? But, they're not able to afford to live here still. So I just see that as something that my concern as having lived here for a long time.
That is the crux of the whole issue. Yeah. A couple notes. We do when we set our annual maximum sales prices for inclusionary housing units, or those that receive fee waivers for us, then we do adjust that price every year, which takes into account inflation to make sure the household is still, even with inflation, only paying, in Longmont's case, 33% of the area median income on their housing payment. But that brings the price down that the builder can sell it for significantly. So it's a super challenge having interest rates in this arena. They're just having even market rate ones, the developers, it's just a huge hit to their pro formas, and it changes their price structure, except they still have to work within what the market could support. So if they won't fill the unit or sell the unit, then that still shows them that they have work to do there. But generally, we know that just even from city employees that something like, and I'm using round numbers because I can't recall exactly, but 20 some years ago, 80% of City of Longmont employees lived here, and now it's 40, because City of Longmont employees have to live further out and commute in, or with remote work that changes the whole world. But generally, that is something like Longmont is no longer just the affordable housing center. It still is for Boulder County communities, being very expensive, but now even Longmont has its own communities that are further out where people are coming in here to work. So that's the crux of the whole issue.
Thank you, Molly, so much for answering all of our questions and challenging questions too.
I look forward to some educational sessions that Eliberto says that you're all interested in, and a little bit more deep dives on some of these topics, because go on for days.
Again, I think, we're happy to set them up. We just need people to let us know that you're interested, and we're happy to arrange with Molly and set them up. And we'll be talking about one of the things that we did here in a bit, as far as like with our nonprofits. And I think it worked really well. So happy to set these up. Just let us know.
And Molly, I just want to thank you for your hard work. I don't know how all of that fits in your brain. And like, it's like a cause and effect, right? Like you're trying to do this over here, but you have to make sure this doesn't rise over here, and you got to make sure the developers are happy over here. And I can't imagine the work that you do and like all the stress that you're under, but I do thank you for, sticking it through and doing the work that you do for the City of Longmont, for the people who are struggling, trying to make these units possible. I don't ever think that there's going to be like one answer, like one solution, but at least getting these conversations going. And then you being so patient with us, asking all these like, questions, right? Of like, yeah, good to know, but there's not really much we can do about it. So anyways, thank you so much for all you do.
Appreciate your kind words. I luckily have a great team, and we are continuing to grow as the housing issues grow too. So that's always helpful. The team really does. They do the heavy lift. I appreciate being able to have this type of conversation so I can like look at all the puzzles rather than, sometimes you get you just like you said, we're tackling one thing at a time, but the whole picture all comes together. So I appreciate it.
And I just wanted to add, for anyone interested in following the ADU conversation at the state level, the bill number is House Bill 24-1152. It's 24-1152. And that is the ADU bill that would, it's essentially a preemption bill. So it would, for certain communities of a certain size, it would require communities to have certain policies about ADUs. So if you're interested in the ADU topic, I would encourage you to follow that bill's path through the remainder of the legislative session.
If it passes, it's going to pre-exempt anything that we've done as a city, and we'll have to follow the state level bill. That's why it's important, because we have our own ADU rules, but if that bill passes, then we'll be forced to follow state level rules.
Can you amend it though?
Probably only through the legislature itself.
For Longmont only?
No, there's a lot of stuff that's state level that we don't have the ability to change.
Often we put through legislative analysis to council, and then council on some bills, not everyone, either takes a position to support or oppose. So they do that periodically. I did want to mention the other bill, which is to expand the affordable housing tax credit, which I have not yet dug into. We just got this one here on Thursday. HB 24-1434.
And that affordable tax credit is
one.
Is that run by CHAFA, Molly? Is that the one?
Yes,
okay.
That's low income housing tax credits or LHAAB.
Okay, so yes, that's a resource that we've tapped before for
Mhm.
to get the funding we need to accomplish some of these projects.
Alberto, you had mentioned some educational sessions, and I was wondering what you suggest if some of us are interested in that. Is it emailing you about?
Yeah, it's emailing me or Brenda, and we will schedule time with Molly. Like if it has, like if it's 3 of you, we have to post it, but that's not a big deal. That's kind of what we talked about last year, is giving you the opportunity for those of you that want to have deeper dive with Molly's team. Brenda and I would organize that with Molly's team, and we just need to know who wants, we need to hear from the board members that are interested, and Brenda and I can help organize it. We can find a room, we can find time, we'll work with Molly's team to have those.
Sounds good.
Great, thanks. Thanks again, Molly.
Thank you so much. Thanks to
Thank you.
everyone for your
Have a good night.
interest and participation. Have a good night.
Good
Night.
Hey, Alberto, are you?
Yes, I am ready. I need to pull this up. I need to share my screen. I need to share my screen. How do I get there? So that
The green on the bottom.
alright, Crystal, folks online, can you see that? Perfect, okay. So every year at the end of the first quarter, which is I give a report on our Homesteady program. So Homesteady is a program that we fund through the Housing and Human Services Advisory Board. We fund through, not through the board, we fund it through the Human Services Set Aside. And that is as you know, we take a portion of that and put it into the grant process that we do, the competitive grant process. And then we take another portion of that, typically around 50%, it's not always exactly 50%. We put that into homelessness services and homelessness prevention. This is the homelessness prevention portion of that funding. It's $200,000 that we give to the Art Center to provide and this is the only way typically that we do direct financial assistance with the human services funding, is through this program where we provide rental or utilities or any other support that will help people stay in their housing. And typically the folks that are eligible for this program are folks that are in need of assistance but are not at the eviction level, and that they typically have, they may be in a tight patch, whether because of medical or a change of jobs or loss of jobs, but they have the capacity to earn enough money to be sustainable without this program, right? So it's $200,000, $120,000 is for direct financial assistance, and then the rest is for staff and administrative support for the Art Center to administer the program. So that's where that comes from. And every year I present some data, and I would like to compare it to the year before, so you can see. There we go. So this is the background. We started, it was part of the 2018 work that we did in the 2017 Human Services Needs Assessment that prioritized homelessness and homelessness prevention. This is our 2022 data. You saw, they assisted 59 families. 17 of them reached their 1 month. They all have a goal of reaching 1 month of rent and saving. It doesn't always, it has varied year to year. And then 53 of those 59 took the county offered financial literacy skills courses, right? And this is how they spent the money. They spent it all, they went spending more than, you can see they went over the 120,000 that they had. This over here for a second. That, that 2022 was a big spending year. Luckily they had some reserves, but this is how much they spent 148,000 in rent, and then utilities and deposit. And I can send this out to the board. I'm sorry I didn't have it ready for the packet. I was working with the Art Center to complete the data. In 2023, we had 45 families, only 3 were able to reach their goal of saving a month's rent, but 36 did take the financial skills support, and they spent $120,631. This is, again, just to compare, they spent all of it. Most of it went to rent, and just very little went to utilities. What I heard is the reason it went mostly to rent is it, and I'm sure Crystal could speak to this as well, because this is the work she does. The challenge that our folks are seeing is that some folks are far behind in the rent. I'm talking months and months behind. And they're coming to the program with $6,000, $7,000 in back rent, and it's a challenge. And so of course we partner with the county has their housing stabilization program. When it was available, a lot of folks were routed to the ERAP, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, to try and lower some of those costs. But that continues to be a challenge of folks coming in with just higher back rent owed. We try and do it. One of the things that we try and do is find out like who are we serving. As you can see here, 34% are single individuals, 29 were single parents, 37 were 2 adults with children in the home, right? So overall, the vast majority are either single or 2-parent households, right? But they all have children. And that's partly also the Our Center really works with families more than homeless individuals. So this is on par with who their target audience is. We sent out 24 surveys to clients who had exited the program within 6 months. We had 46% of the surveys return. I think this is really important for outcomes. We want to know how people are experiencing the program. I think 46% of surveys being returned is a pretty good return rate for nonprofit surveys. Here's some of the data. So one of the first questions we asked is how helpful the program was to remain housed at your same address. As you can, and on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most helpful, 1 being the least helpful. As you can see, vast majority said it was really helpful. And when you read the comments, I didn't put the comments on here, they're anonymous, of course, but when you read the comments, there's a lot of gratitude for the help. So, overwhelmingly, people really appreciate the help that they're getting through this program. Again, we asked them, how did this, now this I thought was interesting. How does this help you prepare for future financial challenges? Well, definitely the overwhelming amount was, the 67% labeled at 5. This is where we start seeing, I hadn't seen 2s and 3s. So I think that to me represents the reality of the difficult financial situation that a lot of our families in. That even though this helps, they still have challenges in their lives as far as their finances are concerned. This is the first time that we've had these kinds of survey returns, but I think it's important to be aware of that. We asked them how confident they felt in staying in their home after the program. Still highly 70% felt very confident they can stay in their home. But now we had folks at the level 10% with folks who had a 2. They weren't very confident about staying in their homes, and 20% were at 3. Again, kind of that lack of confidence of staying in their home based on their situation. So so again, I think the program is very much appreciated, but I think what we're seeing this year from the survey results that we hadn't seen in the past is just really that continued, financial stress that our families in the program are facing. Love to have, any questions you may have about the program.
Yeah, so I guess how closely does the program deal directly with the landlords at all, and can you negotiate? Hey, this person's
They
sick,
can, yeah, because they're sending the landlords a check, so they'll talk to the
Okay.
landlords, yes. I'm gonna stop sharing so we can get to.
So can you, I guess you can ask the landlord, say, hey, this person's 6 months behind, can you?
Landlords may or may not,
Right, okay.
yes, but yes,
Yeah, all right.
yeah. But yes, we do talk,
Mhm.
the staff person does talk to the landlords because they help, funnel that check.
We got a question. Well,
Crystal had a question first.
Yeah, just 2 things. One, I do want to say, like, as far as like what we're seeing at EFA and Boulder, which is not too far away, we are seeing large amounts being owed, but of course, if your rent's 2,200 a month and you're behind 2 months and the third month's coming up, that can add up pretty quick. Another thing is, as far as like the stipulations around the program, like I know some rules are created from the city and agreed to by the R Center. And then do we have a say also in the rules that they lay out on their end? Like, for example, a great example would be EOC funding. EOC is a nonprofit in Denver, Energy Outreach Colorado.
Okay.
They provide up to $2,000 toward families' utility bills per year. And this is not even in-house funding. This is funding that we can get back from this organization to help households who are behind and at risk of shut-off. So with that being said, they have like their rules are like, you at least have to be behind, like you have to be past due, right? And you have to have like, you have to be living in the unit, and they have their own like rules. And then once it comes to our organization, we have our own set of rules as to who qualifies for that appointment. That's not necessarily their rules. And so are we overseeing some of the rules that the R Center is
So-
laying out as well?
Yes, well, yes,
Okay.
so, yeah, the main rule that we put down when we created this program was it has to be sustainable. In other words, you have to have an income stream that, because this only may last up to 3 months. And so that was the main rule, is that, you have to have some source of income that you will be able to continue to be in that home after 3 months. We didn't put a lot of rules outside of that.
Okay, and when you say it can't be toward like evictions, is that like a simple demand? Like if a family has a simple demand, does that count as, or is the R Center calling, the shots on that to determine, like, are they
I think we
determining?
said, I think we set the simple demand rule too. That's a good point. I think we said, and demand means you have a demand to leave the premises, right? So.
Yeah, so I just want to highlight, and I know I had mentioned this last time, and I just want to put it on your radar, right? Because once you get into this world, it can get really technical, like with what Molly does. A lot of the organizations are up to 6 weeks behind in schedule. To even get an appointment, sometimes it takes, even that's, if you're lucky, they have an emergency appointment slot available. And many times you won't get an appointment. Like if it's a true emergency, you won't get an appointment within that 10 days that demands are issued. So if I don't pay my rent, and this actually is true for my realty agency, if I don't pay my rent by the 9th or 10th day of the month, I will be issued a demand. And then demand says, hey, you have this time to pay rent, or we can take legal action. If I don't pay my rent within the 10 days or 30 days that I'm given, and then they take legal action, then it goes through a court process. So
I thought you had to have 30 days.
So
I thought
you can
that's
have
the
10,
state law.
or you can have 30. Some can provide 10. So I just want to be conscious of the families that might be getting pushed out because of the lack of being able to get an appointment. And then by the time they get in, they have a demand. And so just kind of looking at some of the rules and stipulations that we have placed on it, and maybe working with the R Center to see, like, does this still fit overall with what we're seeing in the community today, and what would help?
Yeah, I can bring it up with them again. Again, the good thing is, again, we always use the money, right? We always help families. But I can always ask them what they think about that, about if this, and we're not the other good thing is we're not the only resource they have. Just like EFA has multiple resources, so does the R Center. But our biggest rule, like I said, is really around the income, right? If there's no income that can handle, then this is not a sustainable situation, and just makes it hard to provide this funding, and people will still be out of the home because they just can't manage it. But I can have that conversation with them about what they're seeing as far as like as the demands but I do know they do pre-screen for this program, so like when somebody comes for a regular appointment, my understanding is they do some basic intake and they pre-screen, and if they fit with homesteading, then they'll kind of fast pace them into homesteading. But I can have that conversation with the Art Center and see and get a clearer picture for you all.
Yeah, and I would love if possible, Aliberto, to maybe tag along with you when you have that conversation, so I can kind of ask some questions of my own.
Okay.
If that's
Yeah, I can set a meeting.
So-
Yes.
So this long lag to get an appointment, if you had like, I mean, is it like staffing? So like if you had one more person working on it, or what's?
It's so complicated.
Yeah.
Well, it's not red tape, it's the need, just the oversized need.
Mhm. Okay, yeah.
It is staffing,
Mhm.
it's the resource, so for example, our human services funding doesn't cover. Like the funding that we provide the Art Center outside of this is, and I told Mark, it's really that, how can we help you pay for staff so you can release some money other places for direct financial assistance?
Mhm.
Right, so it's staffing, it's resources, it's the need, it's a complicated issue. It takes all of those things. You know.
Thanks.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's part of the challenge. Go ahead, Michael.
No, I see you mentioned that there's 70% of success. Which is fine, fantastic, that's pretty good, but I'm gonna look at the 30% of failure. What happens to them? I see one worst case scenario, they're homeless.
It can happen, it has happened.
That can happen.
Yeah.
So they would go to a shelter in Longmont or Boulder, and then whatever the next process is, there might be some homeless shelters or homeless housing for them. But I think there's a lot of rules that they have to follow. And depending on who that person is, are they gonna follow those rules?
That's
And
true.
some will follow them, some won't, so they're homeless.
Right.
So this creates homelessness. So what are their options? They go out on the street, get a tent, or do they move back to Denver and move to Denver Rescue Mission, or move?
So what I would say,
Stay here.
the majority of these folks are families, right? So they're not individuals. And again, I think what the Art Center tries to do, there's always gonna be more need than there is resources. That's just the fact of life. They, like I said, homesteading is just one of the resources that the Art Center has at their disposal. They have their own funds, they have county funds, the what's it called, the housing stability, HSP, the housing stability program. If they don't qualify for homesteading, they may qualify for HSP. But even then, HSP requires some sort of, how can this be sustainable? So a lot of folks double up, you know, some folks move to more affordable places. So those are kind of the options. You double up, or you get a better job, or you move to a more affordable place. You try and find a cheap place. You try and get into the lottery for a housing choice voucher, which again takes time and is challenging. The fact is, when I say we, I mean, I'm not saying just Longmont, I mean, we as a country don't have or have not invested the resources that we need into housing, right? It's, Longmont is not in any way, unique in that challenge. We may have higher challenges because of our cost of living, and our housing rates, housing prices, but we're not unique. I think every place in the country, has these housing challenges. But overall, I think the program is working and is doing a good job. We can have those conversations, Crystal. I'm happy to invite you to our next meeting. I meet once a month with them, and we can talk about, I can invite you to that meeting. But yeah, it's just a challenge.
It is.
what I can say is the rental support is just the Band-Aid, it doesn't get to the root, and that's the programs that we need to focus on, is like, How do we build up folks' education? How do we get them attached to better jobs and higher paying jobs? How do we get them stable? How do we get them the childcare they need so that they can go work a full-time job? And so those are all gaps in the system that unfortunately, as well off as Boulder County is, we don't have figured out. And so a lot of these families are falling through the gaps.
And cause I have these conversations a lot. I also wanna make sure that there's everything that Crystal just said, and sometimes people are just so overwhelmed that they can't do it for themselves, right? And we have to try and get them to do it, because and I don't know, Crystal, if you follow this, but I've been doing human services work for many years. One of the rules I learned very early on is I will not work harder than the client, right? Because you can work super hard, you can do so much. And you folks need to also do their part. And sometimes, for many reasons, it's a challenge to get them ready for that. So yeah, so I think the program is doing great, but I also am a little concerned about like I said, those numbers are creeping up on the surveys. And again, that's just a microcosm of what's happening, where people are just, the financial stresses are getting larger and larger in our community, so.
Does that funding increase, Aliberto, each year? Or does it stay constant?
It hasn't, because we've increased the homelessness side. And if we do increase it, and it's just, what it means is we're gonna then decrease something else, right? So we'll decrease the amount available for the human services funding, right? Because we only have a certain amount. So depending on how much our general budget, our 3% increases, we either gonna put that increase on the homelessness side, or we're gonna put that increase on the grant side. When Karen was here, her goal was to get, because when we first started doing the homelessness work, a lot of agencies lost a lot of money, because we basically cut that. Before 2017, all of that money was going to agencies. Right, all of that was going to the grant process, but because council gave direction saying, hey, we need to invest in homelessness services and homelessness prevention, then we took about half of that money and put it into that. But Karen's goal was, we knew how much money that we had for the grant process in 2017, and so we kept pushing council to move us up to 3%, so that we could get back to at least 2017 numbers for the grant process, right? We met that goal in 2022, where we gave the exact same amount of grant money than we did in 2017, right? Because in 2018, 2019, 2020, we had cut that, we had lost, agencies had lost a lot of access to a lot of funding, because we had put it into sheltering, homeless prevention. We have a group of locally controlled vouchers that we do for individual adults that are homeless. And so it took us a while to get back to it. So we could, next year's increase, put it just into the homesteading program, but then that would reduce what we have for the grant, right? So those are the tricky challenges that we have to make. Christina, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and I'm not so sure that we'll have an increase because it's an appraisal year. So I don't know that we'll have any increase. Like, we were lucky last year to have a bit of a bump, but I'm not so optimistic about this year. So
Graham, do
we
you have
may
a,
not have the ability to do that. So yeah, that's kind of, and we'll talk more about the engagement sessions that we've had with our nonprofits, but that's kind of been part of what we've started out with. That, this may not be with the internal needs that we have within the city to address some pay issues with the not being an appraisal year. We may not have much of an increase, if anything.
Graham, your hand is raised?
Yeah, I want to just make a remark about resources. I mean, the city has resources to meet the needs. It's about, so yeah, we're operating within parameters and restrictions that we can't control, but it is also about the priorities that the city and the city council put on those funds and the allocations. And so this board has in years past considered letters to the city council to increase dramatically the allocation of the general city budget to human services, to housing, and even considered a letter that didn't pass this board, but we discussed it. Nelly Berto, I'm sure you might remember, where we talked specifically about taking funds from the police department during a time in our past where that was there was some will of the people behind that issue, and funding housing needs. Just as a point of history about the board, and it's certainly within our purview as a board, as an advisory board, to make those such recommendations that say, hey, you know, if we really want 12% affordable housing, then we're going to need to pull points off of the general budget that goes in other parts of the city. And so, just FYI, I thought I'd just bring that up in this context.
That is true. The board, and again, the board got us up to 3%. It took us several years, because when I first started, we had 1.75% of the general fund for human services funding. And it took several years to get us up to 3%. And the board could ask, you know, can we go to 3.5? Can we go to 3.25? Well, the board doesn't mean you'd get it, but the board could ask for it. You know, not go to 4 or whatever. The board could ask for it, but again.
Right, and I think that if the board is leaning it toward going that way, what I would like to do is set out you know, provide you all with the information that Harold has given council regarding the budget, and actually what the mayor and I presented to the St. Vrain Community Coalition about some of those areas that we're looking at as an upcoming budget year, just so that you have the full context, and then make a decision based on that. And I have the PowerPoint, I can easily send that out, or we can review it in this meeting, but I really would want the board to have that background context so that you can make an informed decision about how you would want to proceed if you decide to proceed in that way.
Got a question too. Yeah, I mean, that would be interesting, because, I mean, this funding, okay, you get so much funding, so what's your outcome? I mean, we just saw a unit to build a 2-bedroom unit is $400,000. Well, that's just one unit. We can forget that one unit, use that 400,000, and you know, how many people are we going to help in a different area? So I'm just kind of looking at that, you know, can we put, you know, HR gets more funding? Well, you just build one less unit for, you know, or 2 less units. So I'm just seeing that's how you can move some of the funding around to maybe help more people.
Some of the challenge with that is, for example, the fee in lieu by ordinance is meant for, like, we can't take that money. Right? We're general funded. We can have conversations about the general fund, but they're like the affordable housing dollars, those are by statute meant to go to those specific projects, right? And we don't give money to build this. The board gives money for programs and services, right? But we don't give money to build units. So our only avenue for more funding is the general fund. We can't tap, like, because some of the stuff is, so for example, we have a public improvement fund that were street improvement that was voted by the voters, right? So that we have no access to some of those things, right? It's because they were voted into that. So our only real avenue, to Graham's point, is the general fund. And you know, again, the board can decide that we want to ask for an increase. You know, Christina can send out the information that we've been receiving, and we could have a conversation about that. We could put it on the agenda for next month, or that would be fine.
Is that something that people want to prioritize for next month's agenda?
I would like to get some context first, like Christina suggested, and I don't know that, I mean, we can definitely start the discussions, but I would like to get together and like learn a little more about like what the whole pie graph looks like, what funding's being allocated where, and how much is that funding needed, where it's going. You know, it could be that everybody's stressed in all levels. And so just kind of getting some context. I don't know if we set another meeting for that between now and then or set it out further. What is your suggestion, Aliberto or Christina?
I'm open to either. I mean, we could have a special meeting, if the board is so inclined to have a conversation about. And we could even invite like, Christina, maybe like, we could invite Teresa or somebody or to come talk about the budget
I
process.
think we could invite Harold to talk about it. He's done
Yeah.
this presentation. He did this presentation with Friends of Longmont Senior Center. I think it was really helpful to kind of have that context and look at, as Crystal said, the rest of the pieces of the pie when you look at the city as an enterprise. There are just so many areas, you know, from keeping potholes on the street filled to public safety, to human services, to internal services, to making sure that our pay is competitive so that we don't lose employees. And so I think having the picture of the whole pie is essential. And so that's something that we could ask Harold about, or you know, the presentation that the mayor and I did for local nonprofit reps at the St. Vrain Community Council had a lot of that information. And so I think we could go either way. If Harold can make it, I think it would be a great discussion.
Yeah, if the board's up to it, we can set up another meeting, that's fine.
And Christina, would Harold be able to tell us, like, does he kind of have like, is he kind of like the head honcho of like all programs, and he would be able to say like, well, actually, I agree that we need more funding in this area and we might have some in this area to pull. So you could ask council for that. Like, would he have the knowledge to give us that?
Absolutely. He would have the knowledge of how, like, he is the CEO of our organization. And so
Okay.
he knows the ins and outs of every, you know, separate business operation within the city organization. So yeah, he would be the best person to give that.
I can work with Erica,
So who exactly is Harold?
he's our city manager.
Oh, okay.
Harold Dominguez is our city manager.
Okay. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just thinking about Molly's presentation too, and kind of combining this conversation with that one. I remember the graphic she showed where when it comes to new construction, very small portion of the funds needed for new affordable housing construction comes from local funds. It comes from state and federal funds. Has this board ever played a role in reaching out to elected officials at the state legislature or others to help secure those large, I mean, that's where the big money is, right?
So
Does this board play a role at all in?
that's a great question.
So as Molly talked about, we do have a lobbyist who is our assistant city manager, basically for our internal services, Sandy Cedar. So she does all of the bill tracking that could potentially have an impact on our business practices. And then how it works is that she'll send out, you know, if it's, for example, an early childhood bill, she'll send it to me. And then I give my initial response to the bill to say this is something that the city should consider supporting, or it would, you know, hurt our business practices in this way. And then she'll take that forward to city council to take an official stance on it. And so we do it in that respect. The other piece where we really work with, you know, for example, the Department of Housing is through Molly's division and Longmont Housing Authority. And so the way that the LHAAB structure fits it within the city is that Harold is actually the executive director of that organization as well, and city council is their board of directors. And so as far as being plugged in on some of the legislative pieces of things, that he really is involved at that level and has had several meetings with DOH, for example.
And I think,
So-
Jeff, I'm trying to think back, has there been times, not necessarily that we've lobbied, but I think so. When. I think this board has just been aware, for example, like when we've received larger grants from ARPA or. I don't think that necessarily this board, you know, was involved in getting some of these larger funds.
Well, I'm just thinking out loud, I mean, like the two bills that were mentioned tonight, 1152 and 1434. I wonder if this board understood what those bills entailed. And we agree that both of those bills would help us get to 12%, they're beneficial to the cause. If then we could, there could be a, you know, a draft email that you provide that we send to our legislators.
Well, this board could not send it to legislators. You could send it to council.
Why could we send it to legislators? We're
Because you're an advisory, you advise council, you couldn't take a position.
we can't.
You can't take it on behalf of the city.
On behalf of the
You can
city,
advise
no.
council to support it, and then the council would take the official position. But this board itself could not send a letter to DOH or.
Right,
we
yeah,
would-
because of the advisory capacity.
Okay.
Similar to how I could not take an official position, as a city employee on an early childhood bill or a housing bill or a mental health bill. I can advise city council and they're the governing body that takes an official stance
Correct.
on any sort of action.
So we could individually
Yes.
advocate for a bill, but not as a representative of
The city.
Longmont.
Right, yes, individually, of course, you can do,
Absolutely.
right,
And we wouldn't be able to, you know, write a letter to provide that as government employees, we can't be involved in that. But yes, you as a citizen, exactly, Martha.
yeah, totally.
Yep.
And this board could recommend, like, if this board wanted to say to council, hey, we read the
Mhm.
bills, cause Sandy asked information from.
Absolutely.
We could provide our feedback to council, but ultimately as council, even with our human services funding, we all do the work and we put the recommendations. Like I always tell you every year, council could change that.
Yeah. Do we know, I mean, I'm sorry, we're getting into the weeds here, and so pull us out if you want us to. Well, but you mentioned the city has a lobbyist. Do we know what? Is staff briefed on what the priorities are for the lobbyist?
Yeah, so that is, as I mentioned, Sandy Cedar, and she really tracks all of the bills. And then we'll pull the specific bills and send them out to the corresponding department. And then really her official stance on any sort of bill as the lobbyist really comes through what council directs as, you know, yes, we will support this, or no, we're gonna oppose
Yeah,
this.
she'll
But
reach
that's
out,
really, that's her role.
yeah,
Mhm.
she'll reach out to staff that have. Either, you know, because that's the work that they do, like if it's a transportation bill, she'll reach out to transportation, get their feedback on the bill, and then. You know, she'll bring it back to council with staff recommendations or staff thoughts. And then council. You know, decides the official stance. So.
Well, if staff feels like it would be valuable for the board to provide additional feedback to the town council about any state bill that affects housing, I would suggest we take that up as an action item.
And you can always do it as public invited to be heard as well at one of our meetings. So think about that, you could always do it as public invited to be heard, to be in the minutes.
You only have 3 minutes.
You got 3 minutes, but you can.
Hey,
Alright,
I've
so
heard some people make some pretty good arguments in 3 minutes.
yeah. Yeah, anybody can sign up, as a municipal board member, you can sign up for like, I wanna, you know, Brenda, I wanna sign up, I wanna do my 3 minutes of public invited to be heard, you could do that.
But my understanding is, here's the problem, you should get an answer, give an answer. Cause if they just hear the problem, you know, you rely on them to solve it, but you got an answer, give an answer, you know, problem to answer, and then we can move it in your direction. Yeah,
But again, you can always provide direction to council. You can always recommend direction to council, again, whether they accept it or not. But the board is always welcome to say, because that's your job, you advise staff, you advise the council. You're not a governing board, you're an advisory board. All right. So if there's no more questions about homesteading, we did want to talk about, and I want to thank publicly Cindy and Michael for being there. We had our first nonprofit engagement meeting, and I thought it was and it got it may be on our city YouTube, I think, because it was because
Yeah,
we
It
didn't know how
was,
many
it was
board
being
members-
recorded, yep. Mhm.
Yeah, we didn't know how many board members were coming. We invited the boards, we didn't sure, so because we had invited the board, we had to post it. And so Longmont Public Media sent a person to record the meeting. And so it may be on our YouTube page by now. But we had some notes that we wanted to share. And we're not, I think it's in your meeting packet, so I'm not gonna spend there it is. I'm not gonna spend a whole lot of time, but we basically asked two questions. I did want to talk about the two questions that we asked. The first question, similar to Monty's situation, right, where the needs continue to grow and the resources don't, right? The first question was really around, I'll see if I can't read that, that's too small, I'll get up my computer. Yeah, let me get this so I can read it. Given the economic realities that both nonprofits and the city are facing, what are some ideas on how to best leverage the Longmont Human Services funding? And we did this World Cafe model where we asked folks this question, and they were they shared their ideas with us, and we wrote them down. I think Michael, you're in one group, Cassie, you're in another group. Yeah, and we some of the answers they brought were very innovative, and some were hard, right? So like I think about the one that says, look at budget and prioritize, right? That's hard. There's some hard answers that were given, right? What I will say, one of the clear, because I've heard it multiple times. Now, one of the clear takeaways, what was really appreciated was the city's leadership on bringing folks together to have these conversations, knowing that they're not easy conversations, knowing that you may not walk away feeling, really great, because we're asking some hard questions. But it was really a good time to have conversations. If you want to go down, Brenda, so we had you can see the notes for the two groups. We broke up into two. I think we had 10 people there. We had two groups. And the second question was around, how do we shift? Because talking about what we've talked about at this board, about the board wanting to know, what are the outcomes? What is happening because of the funding you're receiving? And I got some great insight, especially from our health providers. They say, we ask for a lot of data on our application that they don't collect because they are very wary of privacy laws and they have a lot of restrictions. So for example, many times they don't collect income data, or they might not even collect racial data or ethnicity data because they're worried about HIPAA and other things. And sometimes they see that as a barrier, right? So the Rise Against Suicide was there, right? And so, they were saying, look, we just want to we don't care background or finance, we just want to get kids connected with a therapist as soon as possible. And so we make our intake application as easy as possible. So it's hard for us to fill out your application because, we don't always track all that data. And I thought that was an interesting conversation. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to change because we're a government agency and we need to have this as much as we can of this information. But we also want to be understanding of their reality, right? So overall, I just thought it was really informative. You got the notes. That first group was really interesting. Again, I had a lot of the health group in the first one, and that second to the last one, we had a really good conversation about nonprofits always must prove themselves, right? that there's a lot of scrutiny on nonprofits, and there is, and I was like, yeah. I said, well, there's a lot of, this meeting's being recorded, is available to the public, there's a lot of scrutiny on the work that you all do and that we all do as well. Right, this is a public meeting, so I totally get the idea that we need to prove ourselves and the scrutiny that is required. For those of you that were there, any other thoughts, Michael, Cassie, or Christina, and then if there's any questions or thoughts, we can talk about those as well.
No, I just thought it was interesting, like you came up with a problem and you ask everybody in this group what the answer is, and everybody will come up with their own answer. Then we put it together, and I thought that was really interesting because I think it's maybe just one group solving the problem, which they might be able to, but maybe there's some other inputs from other areas, and maybe it's easier to solve that problem, or it's more complete, or maybe worse. But it's, you're able to look at those options to have different people's ideas, and I thought that was pretty good. It was very, some people get stimulated. Here's their answer, and then they come up with their answer, and I thought it was a good outcome. Yeah.
And I like the fact that we talked about working with the business community and having more, and not sort of us against them, but sort of roundtables. And then we could share information so that the business community realizes that we're not just always asking for money, but that we're providing these services that help the community. So that's sort of the finance econ, right? Because it resonates with some people much more than just the fact that we need money, which we do need. That makes sense.
Yeah, I think for me that one of the things, and I just heard it from Harold, our city manager today, is that when people come to him with problems or with concerns, he really is clear about, that the government isn't always the answer, or the place to go to fix all of the problems. It really is incumbent upon the community to work in partnership with us. And so I think that these sessions are a really good idea, or a really good opportunity to start to plant those seeds with our nonprofits that we are working with, to say, okay, what is it that you all can do as a collaborative of nonprofits to start to leverage what you have, the resources that you have to meet some of these needs. And I think that this board has talked about, in the grant application, do we ask about how they work with other nonprofits? And so I think this is a really good way to start to plant those seeds, and hopefully, nonprofits will come around and kind of circle around themselves to say, okay, well, we can leverage this and we can leverage that. And at the end of the day, what that will do is hopefully impact the bottom line of our budget to say, okay, we have these nonprofits leveraging one another. And so that means that there's more money in the pot to fill service gaps in other areas. And so I was really encouraged with that.
I really like that you said that, Christina, because I was thinking about that. I was like,
hey,
what can
great
we do?
minds.
I know. What can we do if we came together as a community?
Absolutely.
Things move. And when we talk about government and systems, these are systems of oppression. Like, although we're not consciously running systems of oppression to oppress people, but they were structured that way. And it's so hard to unstructure them because the tower is already built. So it's like, okay, how do we work within it? And a lot of the times it's working outside of it. It's working in the community. We were talking about all of our nonprofits being siloed. And so I can imagine a person, I think of this little stick person having so much need and not knowing where to go, and having all these different organizations, but their doors are shut and there's not really direction on who's going to help them. But if everybody came together and this person from this organization walked them to the next store, and then that person from that organization, after providing that support, walks them to the next store, then these people could get the full wraparound support that they needed to be self-sufficient in their education and their income and their knowledge and their whatever skills that they might need, or whatever lack it is that they have. And I think that's it. I think you hit the nail on the head, you and the city manager, of our community has to come together.
Right.
And how do we do that? You know, Longmont is growing, right? But how do we get the community back together to be that community, to show up for their neighbors, to show up for each other in the hardest of times, which right now is, but it's gonna get worse, right? And so like, just that alone would make a difference.
Right. Yeah, and that's the true definition of collective impact, right? And what, from a collective impact framework, how can we really leverage everything that everybody does to make access as easy as we can for those who need it the most? And I think that really is the goal.
So when is our next one, Brenda? I think Brenda's helping organize these.
Our next one is scheduled for June 20th at the same location, from 9 to 11.
June
And I
20th from
will
9 to
go-
11.
Yep, and I will send out information on that once I get it kind of posted onto our Prime Gov and so forth.
And it's a beautiful space. If you've not been to the Callahan House, it's a gorgeous, it's just a gorgeous space to me. So we had some really good conversations. And so that's all I have. I'm not sure what's next on the agenda.
Sorry about that. I pulled it off and
Thank you, Christina. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Other announcements or other business that anyone has? No? All right, is it time to adjourn then? Anybody like to make a motion to adjourn?
I motion.
A second? All in favor?
Awesome, thank you. And we have more than just June 20th. We'll have more throughout the year, so.
Yeah.
All right, thank you all. Have a
Thank
good
you,
night.
everybody. Okay,
Bye.
we'll
thank
talk to
you.
you soon. Bye.
Night.
I have a question, not connected with this, but just